Good morning, Makers Church. If we have not met, my name is Derrick, and I do serve here as the lead pastor from time to time. If we haven't met over the last 3 months, it's because I've been gone on my first ever sabbatical that was just absolutely wonderful. And so we just thank you guys so much for supporting us through that and for being the church in our absence. And it's so wonderful to be back. My wife and my kids, thank you guys and myself, thank you for just the immense rest and restoration that we received along the way. And we're more than excited to be back and serving alongside of all of you in trying our best to live our mission as a church. And so if you're new with us, or you're new to Makers, or you haven't had the lead pastor up here for 3 months reminding you of what our mission is as a church, then I'm going to do it again, just to kind of help frame everything that we're up to as a community. And so we say here at Makers Church, this is just our spin on what we believe God's invitation is to the entire church, ultimately to live out the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. We wrap it up like this. We say that we exist to make on earth as it is in heaven, by developing and commissioning followers of Jesus Christ to love God and to love others. And this is the thing that we keep in front of us as a team, as a church community, as we plan and plot and prepare and provide and do all of the different things that we do together as a church. And it was this very mission that led our pastoral team and our board and our elders to make the decision to have our pastoral team take sabbaticals over this next year. And so if you didn't know, I just have come back from mine. Pastor Shalise will take hers over the summer. Pastor Mark will take hers in the fall, or his in the fall. And so we're excited for all of this. And this really came out of us sensing and feeling like God was inviting us to tend more deeply to the things of our inner lives. To take more seriously our need and our desperation to be deeply connected to Him, and to be more about being with God than doing things for God. And this is something that was even shaped by this prayer that comes out of each year. We kind of have a theme that guides our decision making, and usually a scripture that supports that. In Colossians 2. Verses 6 to 7 was the verse that we chose for 2023. It says, "Therefore, as you received Christ Jesus the Lord, so walk in Him, rooted and built up in Him, and established in the faith, just as you were taught, overflowing in thanksgiving." And so really this passage has helped us create this vision for a year that would move not just the pastoral team, but our entire church into becoming more rooted and established in Christ. And so we've been walking along together as a church community through a tool that we thought would be helpful, this common prayer book. And it's really interesting when you, it's common prayer, a liturgy for ordinary radicals. And I love that word radical because it sounds so cool, doesn't it? Like, who doesn't want to be radical? I want to be radical. And if you study the word, all it means is rooted. To be radical simply means to be rooted, to be deeply connected. And that's exactly the season we're in together as a church. Not just our church, but the global church as we observe this season of Lent. As we've been talking about, Pastor Mark and Shalise have been leading us over the last several weeks, that we are celebrating and observing and participating in this season called Lent, this move of 40 days of reflection and celebration from Ash Wednesday until the day before Easter, as we practice these things that help us be more rooted. And so we've invited you, and many of you have responded to either give something up or to add something into your life, or maybe both. What I've discovered in my life is that if I choose to add something, it automatically displaces something else because I only have so much capacity. So when I say that I'm going to commit to waking up early and having my personal time with God, it also means that I need to go to bed earlier. That I need to find some other ways to make room for that in my life. And so that's what we invited you into together. That's what we're celebrating in. That's the season that we're in. together as a church. And our hope is that we would be, in this season, prepared as a springboard into deeper intimacy with Christ. And that's exactly what the sabbatical was for us. It was kind of a Control-Alt-Delete. It was a hard reboot for us so that we could practice as a family and me individually some really important things that we think matter most for our belovedness to be known as we connect with Jesus. It's not about performance. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It's not about piety or doing things to earn favor with God, but it's about things that we can put on and things that we can put off that allow us a more deep intimacy with Him. And so I would say that the overarching metaphor that I've sensed God doing in my life is teaching me how to set down a very, very full plate in exchange for an overflowing cup. And I feel like that's what God has been doing in me, not just from the start of my sabbatical, but leading up to it as we prepared for it. And that's my hope and my heart, my prayer for you, is that you too would learn how to set down a very full plate, an overfilled plate. That you would learn how to set that down in exchange for an overflowing cup. So one of the things that my family was focused on during my sabbatical was practicing for the very first time as a family the rhythm of Shabbat or Sabbath. I mean, for us, we have every excuse in the book as to why we can't do that as a family, why it doesn't work. I work full-time as a firefighter. We lead a church. My wife works full-time. We have 3 kids. They all have 3 sports and too many friends and social calendars and schedules. And we also have all sorts of hobbies that we love and try to make room for in our lives. And so for us, doing anything regular once a week, forget about it. And so we thought, that's for other people. It's a great idea. I could preach about it. But we weren't about it. And so one of the focuses of our time together was, how can we figure this out? Given all the things I just said, how can we make space? How can we carve out time to spend more time being than doing? And so we've been studying and practicing this Shabbat Sabbath thing, and it's been real messy. We are by no means experts, but we've started. And I think that's the most important thing. And if you look at our calendar, when we calendar it in, sometimes it's on Thursday, and sometimes it's on Friday, and sometimes it's on Saturday. And sometimes we have the best laid intentions, and then the kids are a disaster, and I turn into a mess, and I yell at my 5-year-old for eating the communion bread before it was time. I mean, it's just an example of what could happen. But as we've been studying this and practicing this, there's actually a traditional ceremony that happens in the Jewish tradition with Sabbath that we haven't even practiced yet as a family, but this idea, this ceremony has caught my heart and my attention. And it's called the Havdalah. It's at the very end of communion, or of Sabbath. Usually Sabbath in the Jewish tradition starts Friday night at sundown and ends Saturday night at sundown. And it usually ends with this beautiful ceremony called the Havdalah. And there's 3 elements to it where they light an intertwined or braided candle. You smell some sweet spices. And then you do a blessing over the wine. And as the wine is being blessed, and it's poured into the cup, this is what's done every time during this ceremony. On purpose, you overflow the cup. And it's this beautiful reminder. And this is as you end the Sabbath, and you're preparing yourself to step into the week and take on all the things that God has invited you into and entrusted you with to steward. And it's this beautiful metaphor that all of the pouring out that we're supposed to do in the week to come is meant not to come from the cup, but from the plate. Not to come from the cup. We're meant to have our cup overflowing at all times. And everything we give unto others is from here and not here. And studying this and contemplating this and pondering this and thinking about this, it was such a revelation to me. Because I've lived my entire whole life with an empty cup. I'd go back to God to get just enough. Maybe the bottom of the cup filled so I can then pour it out. And I don't know about you, but so many times I found myself with a dry cup. The cup of my life just empty, depleted, and unfulfilled. And so many times you come back to God with an empty cup. You may try some things or do some things that might get something splashed into your cup to then just again go pour it out. And this metaphor has been such a beautiful reminder and invitation to find a way to keep the cup full at all times, because that's what God has for us. To set down an overfilled plate in exchange for an overflowing cup. And that all that we would do unto others would come out of this saucer underneath it that catches the overflow. I just realized I've made a mess here, and if I move it, it's going to stay there. So we'll just keep it there as a reminder for us this morning. No, we'll just keep staring at it. And so this has been just deeply challenging me to figure out how to give the best of myself from here and not from here. And then it begs the question of, how do I keep this cup full? And Psalms 23 inspires this whole reality. It talks about the cup overflowing. And I just want to read it because it's been so powerful to me. This is probably one of the best known Psalms. Before I even tried to be about it, I could recite it because it's just so known. It's so common. If you just close your eyes and I read it over you. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and your love will follow me all of my days, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And this is the symbolism, the metaphor that I want to begin to live my life from. And my prayer and my hope is the same for you. I want to give out of the overflow, not the bottom of the cup. And this looks like all sorts of things, and I will try to get to some practical things in a moment. But it looks like finding ways to connect with God, to allow him to be our shepherd that can do these things, lie us beside in pastures and beside still waters and lead us down paths and all of those things. And these look like habituating daily, weekly, annually, and maybe even 7 years like the scriptures talk about. And there's some practical stuff that we'll try to get to towards the end, but how do we keep the cup full? So what does this mean for our day-to-day life? How do we become more radical, more rooted, and connected to the heart of God? And I think that this all matters because it stems from the great invitation and the great commandment and commission that Jesus gives us. If you think about the great commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. I don't know about you, but that is really compelling to me. Like, I desperately want to learn and know how to love my neighbor as myself. And I fail at it all the time, and it's typically because I'm trying to love out of an empty cup. So I think if we're inspired by the end of that whole thing, that we would love one another so deeply and so richly, then we need to kind of back into having our cups filled. How do we learn how to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength? And then even if you look at that, praying the thing that Jesus taught us how to pray, Lord, would your kingdom come? Would your will be done on earth as it is in heaven? There's this tension here that is so awe-inspiring and so confusing at times. But it begins to take shape when we choose to be radical or rooted. And it's not, when I think radical, I think magical. I think like big and exciting and amazing. I want the blue pill or the red pill. I want the quick fix, the thing that will do it. But you know what it does? Is saying yes to simple invitations like this. Like daily choosing to be rooted. And so we've chosen to do this as a church, and I'm going to do a quick poll, and this is not to make anyone feel bad. This is just a genuine wondering. How many of you know what this book is? Common Prayer. Raise a hand. Cool. We've tried to talk about it a lot, and we've invited you in to journey with us. This is not the red pill or the blue pill. This is not the quick fix, but it is a tool that would help us become rooted. If we want to know, how do we have our cups full? Because this is inspiring. I want a full cup. I want to give out of the overflow of my life. How can we get there? How do we get there? And so we've invited you to do this. So how many of you know, many of you know what this is? How many of you have a copy of this? Just raise your hand. Okay, great. If you don't have a copy, we'd love to get you a copy. If you don't know what this is, I'm not going to tell you about it right now because I haven't preached in 3 months and I got a lot more to say. But if you want to know about this, please come find me. I would love to give you one and walk you through what this is and how we're using it as a church. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands publicly for this, but many of you know what this is. Many of you have a copy of this. The next thing I would ask you to do is raise your hand if you've, actually, we'll do this. If you've opened it, you've cracked it open, you've read a cool thing, awesome. So good. I won't ask you to sell yourself out here, but how many of you are daily leveraging it or using it? Don't raise your hand. Thanks, Debbie. So there's one of us. And so the invitation is to daily walk through it. And the important thing is that all this is a signpost. It gets us to Jesus. It gets us to the scriptures. It gets us to prayer. But it's a tool. It's a guide. Left to our own devices, I don't know where to start. How do I habituate these things in my life so that my cup stays full? How do we get to the presence of God without knowing where to start? And so once again, if you have other practices and things you're doing, teach us your ways. We had that happen this morning. One of our volunteers, Michael, who also shared the reading this morning, he taught our entire volunteer group this morning a tool on how he hears the voice of God, and it was so special. So by all means, we're not saying that this is it. But if there's nothing, this is a great, great start, and we'd love to get this into your hands. I say all of that because the passage I kind of want to unpack this morning is just today's passage. So if you read your common prayer this morning, it would ask you to read some passages, and this is the passage for today. Mark chapter 7, verse 24 through 30. It says, Jesus left that place, and he went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, that he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia, and she begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. And she went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know what to do with that passage. And this is the beauty of habituating these things in our lives, where something else is guiding us through and saying, hey, this is something you should probably ponder or think about, reflect on. And so I was met with the challenge of trying to figure out, what in the heck does this passage mean that I've overlooked or skipped because it was just hard and challenging along the way. And if you ever do Bible roulette, if that's your way that you connect with God, that's great. You just like flip the text, find something, read it. And if you don't like it, you just find something you like. That's cool. And that's honestly way better than doing nothing. But having to wrestle with this stuff. I literally, because I was like, you know what? Every day there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. And we're in Exodus right now. And Exodus is pretty exciting. That's pretty fun to preach on. And so every ounce of me was like, I want to preach on the Exodus text. But instead I wanted to sit and wrestle with this. And what came to me is that even though these two ideas are seemingly disconnected, having our cups overflowing and giving this to others, how does that connect with this? I don't know if it does. I hope it does. But I want to unpack this text and see what it might mean for us today. What we'll see, just a quick reminder to kind of set this whole thing up. The whole idea is that we're trying to do what Jesus asked us to do, which is to live out the Great Commandment, Great Commission. At the end of it all, that we would love others as we love ourselves. And like I said, that invitation, that vision, that mission is pretty compelling to me. I try really hard to that, and to my own demise, I try to do that all the time out of my own power. The mission's so compelling to me that I'll find myself trying to serve others out of a deep emptiness. My wife, my children, the citizens of San Diego as a firefighter, you as a pastor. And I'll find myself just depleted and empty. And Jesus tells us not only to love our neighbors as ourselves, but to love our enemies. And those things are pretty radical. And so as we aim to follow Jesus, one of the greatest virtues is to become selfless. And that, all of this stuff that God invites us to do and that he does in our lives, all of it, and we'll see this in the big story of God, none of it's for us. It's always for the benefit of others. We see this in the story and life of Israel, that Israel was set apart. They were consecrated. They were blessed. They were made to be holy. Not just so they could feel great about themselves, but they were blessed to be a blessing. That God would bless all the nations, all the people, all of humanity through this special people group. And so, as I've been contemplating this and thinking about all of this, it dawned on me. Selflessness is the goal. How do we become selfless? But what dawned on me is the most selfless thing we can do is selfishly pursue Jesus. The most selfless thing we can do is selfishly pursue Jesus. And I see this happening in this story. Mark chapter 7, verse 24, Jesus left the place and he went to the vicinity of Tyre. Now I find it interesting that he was exhausted and tired, so he went to Tyre. We see leading up to this, in fact, June preached on this last week, beautiful story about Jesus walking on the water and Peter and all of that. And as you read Mark, all of these miracles and things are happening, and Jesus is exhausted. And all of these miracles are happening when he's trying to get away. Even, he's going to the other side of the lake to get away. And boom, there's 5,000 people. They beat him there to the other side. And he's just fed the 5,000, and now he's like, okay, for real now, I'm going to go on sabbatical. He's like, I'm going to get away. And so he goes to an area called Tyre, which is, it's a Gentile place. It is a place outside of Israel. It's to the north. It's on the sea. And these are where most Jewish people would never be caught dead. And if they were caught there, they would probably be dead. And so Jesus goes there because he knows that all of these Jewish people aren't going to follow him there. And so he's in this town trying to get some rest. And lo and behold, it says he entered this house and he didn't want anyone to know. It says, yet he could not keep his presence a secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came, and she fell at his feet. Now, what I see in this woman, as I think oftentimes where we find ourselves, she's at the end of herself. Her cup is empty. No matter what she's done or what she tried or who she's called upon, she can't do anything about this situation. She has no power to cast out a demon. She has no power to heal her daughter. She's at the end of herself. She's desperate. So what I think is so interesting is that even though the religious people didn't follow Jesus there, the desperate people did. And I wonder if you might find yourself there this morning. Just like desperately in need of an encounter with Jesus. Desperately in need to be in his presence. It says she fell at his feet. And then what's so interesting in the story is the woman was Greek. She was not Jewish. She was a Gentile. And she was a woman. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. Now, just quick pause, quick side note. March is what? What do we celebrate in March? Women's History Month, right? Women's History Month, because there's been a lot of great women who have done a lot of things that haven't been noticed. And so I think it's important that we notice how God is using this woman in this story. How God is using this woman who breaks all of the customs of the day. She breaks all of the rules. She's radical in her approach. She's not even a person of God. Yet she throws herself at the feet of Jesus. And she's breaking all the cultural rules. First, she's a woman, which means all sorts of implications. If you study biblical history, you know that back then a woman's word meant nothing. It took 3 women's accounts to testify in court as it would take one man. Right? It was 3 times the amount of women it would take to get anybody to believe anything that was being said. Women were othered, they were ostracized, they were social inferiorities, there was all sorts of religious marginalization, there was political inequality. There was all sorts of reasons why this woman had no business placing herself at the feet of this rabbi. And if you go look in the other accounts in the Gospels, you'll see this exchange where the disciples are like, get her out of here. They're saying, dismiss her. She needs to be gone. And it said Jesus stays and plays. Stays and plays. It's interesting, in the fire department, we have this decision-making tool where if someone's like really, really sick, you know, you can either stay and play, which is like stay and take care of the issues, give medications, do certain things that need to do, or you do rapid transport to the hospital, right? Get him off the scene and get him there. And you just see Jesus staying and playing here. She's in desperate need of him, and he's not dismissing her. He's not sending her somewhere else. He's just staying, and he's engaging with her. And I think what's so interesting is also that it's her failed attempt at helping her daughter that gets her to the feet of Jesus. I don't know about you, but that really resonates with me. I think one of the things that can send me back to God the quickest is my inability to be a loving husband, a loving father, a compassionate person. When left to my own self, I have nothing to offer. I have nothing to give. And she's there, she's depleted. And it's her inability to love her daughter in the best way that she possibly can by helping her get delivered from this thing that was oppressing her. And it's that very thing that gets her to the feet of Jesus. And I wonder if you could see yourself in that need as well. Like desperately wanting to be, you know, our culture is really, really excited about being the best version of ourselves, about being the best that we have to offer. And I think what the scriptures teach us is the only way to be the best version of ourselves is to have our cups filled by throwing ourselves to the feet of Jesus. And it's our failed attempts at loving others well that might be the very thing that teach us how to learn to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. The filling up of our cup to overflowing. But what's interesting in this passage is you can see Jesus seems a bit rude here. He talks in his parables, which are often troubling, but he says this. He says, first, let the children eat all they want, he told her. For it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. And if you study what's going on in the cultural context of this day, if you were a Jew, you called Gentiles dogs. If you were a Gentile, you called Jews dogs. And what Jesus is doing is calling this woman a dog. Whew. But if you study this, and the biblical scholars, they say that Jesus is actually being playful here. That they're engaging in a rhetoric with one another. And he knows that she's up for the spat, up for the joust, the challenge. And it's not anything that's not normal. They just would, that's just the way they refer to one another. And what Jesus is doing here is he's teaching his disciples how to be as he interacts with this woman. They're watching. Even though they've said send her away, cast her away, Jesus is staying and engaging with this woman. And he's teaching them that no one should be othered, that no one should be cast out. But at the same time, Jesus knows his assignment. He knows his mission. He knows that his assignment from God the Father on earth was to come for the Jewish people. That was his main assignment. And so when you see all of these disturbances or these disruptions, Jesus is wrestling with knowing what his assignment is, but knowing what the big move and picture of God is. It's like he's on an assignment here, but there's a bigger story that's happening. This inbreaking of the kingdom of God that will extend and reach every human being on the face of the earth. But in this moment in time, he's there to win the Jewish people over. Why? Because the Jewish people would be the ones who would become a blessing to the nations. We see it in the end after Jesus dies and resurrects. He says the Great Commission to go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It just isn't time. You see Jesus wrestling with this all the time in all of his miracles. He's like, but don't tell anybody. Because he knows his assignment. He knows his calling. He knows what he's meant to do. But he also knows the heart of God the Father. And so there's this disruption that is taking place. And what he's saying is not that the bread is only for the children. What he's saying by children, he's talking about Jewish people. So let me put this in the cultural context. He's saying, first, let the Jewish people eat all they want. For it is not right for the Jewish people to take their bread and toss it to Gentiles. That's really what's happening here. And he's saying, the priority first is for the children of God, for these Jewish people. But he's not saying that it's only for the Jewish people. He's just saying first. You see that? First for the Jewish people. And I love this. So we know this. We see this throughout the scriptures. Romans 3:29 says, or is God the God of Jews only? Is he not the God of Gentiles too? Yes, of Gentiles too. So we see this worked out through the scriptures. Paul is instrumental in helping the church expand to all peoples and all nations. And we see this happening. But this is so exciting. This is so cool. We know this. God wasn't blessing Israel for Israel's sake. He was blessing them to be a blessing to others. He's teaching his disciples something here. He's using this exchange with this woman to teach them how to be like him. And she's a boss. She says, Lord, she says, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And what she's saying is, is I understand the big story of God. I understand that this Yahweh, this God of all, the creator of all the heavens and earth, he is not a God that has only come for those people who live on the other side of that border. He has come for all of us. She sees these signposts to the future, to the redeeming and the reconciling of all things, to the recreation of all things. She senses it and she sees it. And she says, if that's going to happen out there, then why not do it now? She's literally pulling the future into the present. This is how Jesus taught us how to pray. Would your kingdom come? Would your will be done on earth as it is in heaven? She's pulling the present reality of the kingdom of God the future reality into the present. She's saying, if it can happen out there, then why not now? And this is the same tactic I use when Laurel and I are fighting. I do, I mean it. I'm like, look, we already know marriage is forever. She's gone, so I can say whatever I want. And marriage is forever, and we're going to forgive one another. And so why are we going to stay mad at each other now if tomorrow we're going to be good? Let's just be good now. She hates it. But this is what this woman's doing. She's pulling the future reality of the kingdom of God into the present. She says, yeah, maybe it is for the children of God to eat first, but I'll just take the crumbs and the crumbs will be enough. And I don't want to wait till then. Let's do it now. And she's in verbal judo with Jesus. They're back and forth. They're dancing. They're like in a hip hop battle right now. And Jesus is like, all right, we don't got to wait. Go home, your daughter's healed. And what this woman teaches us is so powerful. What this woman teaches us is that we can long for the things of God, for the big story of the way God is going to move and the big story of what God is going to do. And we can say, Lord, would your kingdom come? Would your will be done now? And she's teaching us how to long for the things of God, but she knows how to get it. To go to his feet. To be in relationship with him. To know that she can do nothing on her own to bring that about. But the God of the universe most certainly can. And what we see here is she was unable to help her daughter. But she goes to Jesus, and God blesses her, and in turn her daughter is healed. God fills her cup, and the overflowing of her interaction with Jesus is what heals her daughter. And the same is true for us, that God blesses us not to fill our cup so we can feel great about a full cup. He blesses us to overflowing so that out of the overflow of our lives, we can be a blessing to others. He gives us forgiveness so that we can forgive others. He gives us grace so we can extend grace to others. He gives us peace so that we can be a presence of peace in the lives of others. And what we see in this story is that even though she pursues and pressures and petitions and persuades and pesters Jesus, that she meets with him there. And if that's what it takes to get you to the feet of Jesus, then that's what it takes. The most selfless thing we can do is selfishly pursue Jesus. And so I'll end with this. To be quite honest, for a long time, I didn't even really have a desire to sit at the feet of Jesus. I wanted to do all the things for him and be part of what he's up to, but just sitting at the presence of Jesus' feet, I don't got time for that. But I knew it was important. So I spent the last year and a half praying, God, would you give me the longing to long? Would you give me the longing to long? To sit with you, to learn how to be with you, to be in your presence, to return to your feet. And what God's been doing in my life is giving me the desire, giving me the want, the longing. Not to practice to just petition and plead and pester. That got me there, but to just be with him. Oh, and that good shepherd shows up. that leads me beside still waters and lies me down in green pastures, and my cup feels overflowing. The cup is overflowing. And that's the way that I want to live, and that's my prayer and my hope for you and for us as a church. And so you might be wondering, so now what? Where do I start? A challenge. If you haven't started, pick up a copy of this and just read it every morning. Carve out time to read it. Read the scriptures and pray. We'll spend some time in the next several weeks talking about some practices that we can do. I would love to be an aid to you to practice some things that might help you get to the feet of Jesus to have an overflowing cup. But the challenge is to just do it for 1 week. We're in the season of Lent. If you haven't started, it's not too late. And I would invite you to just take this book and every morning between now and next Sunday, give it a go and see what God does. So I'll end with this benediction. Lord, give us this day our daily bread, and may we be okay if all we get is the crumbs. May we have faith like the Syrophoenician woman that the crumbs will be enough. Lord, may we pursue you as she did, not hesitating to bother you with our needs and trusting in your goodness and even in your sense of humor. And may we know that when we pursue you for our needs, you give us yourself in return. And through your presence, you fill our cups to overflowing. Jesus, you don't offer us full plates. You offer us cups that are overflowing. And may we serve others out of that overflow. So during this next song, we're going to receive communion together. And you guys can stand now. And as the band begins to play, we invite you to come forward to one of these 4 stations to receive communion. It's an opportunity for us to reflect and remember and respond to the grace that God has given us in his life, death, and resurrection of Jesus and the free gift of life that he offers us. It says that on the night that he was betrayed, he took the bread and broke it and said, "This is my body, take and eat in remembrance of me." And after supper, he poured out the wine and he said, "This is my blood, a sign of the new covenant. Take and drink and remember me." And so may we be reminded this morning that Jesus didn't give us full plates, but he invited us to the table with a simple bread and simple cup. He gave us the bread and the cup, and perhaps this morning the bread can remind us of the crumbs that are enough. And the cup symbolized the overflowing love of Jesus in our lives. And so this table is the table of good company with Jesus and with those who love him. So come to the table, you who have much faith, and you who would like to have more. You who have been here often, and you who have not been here for a long, long time. You who have tried to follow Jesus, and you who have failed, come. It is Christ who invites us to meet him here. Let's receive.